This is part 3 of the series, Eunuchs, the Deep State of Rome. We're going through examples of when the eunuchs used their power to influence the Roman emperors. We have seen them become generals, try and crown popes, declare who in fact would be the emperor in the first place. Let's look at some more examples. The eunuchs would also be able to conspire about marriages between the elite. Roman prefect Rufinus sought to strengthen his political position by marrying his only daughter to Emperor Arcadius, but the marriage was prevented by the eunuchs. The principal eunuch respectfully entered the mansion, brought another woman with him, and conducted her in triumph to the palace and bed of Arcadius. The secrecy and success with which this conspiracy against Rufinus had been conducted imprinted a mark of indelible ridicule on the character of a minister who had suffered himself to be deceived. In a post where the art of deceit and dissimulation constitute the most distinguished merit, he considered, with the mixture of indignation and fear, the victory of an aspiring eunuch, who had secretly captivated the favor of his sovereign. When this marriage was dissolved, it led to further fighting. It is these types of quotes that I'm about to read which got me thinking there was so much more to the eunuchs and their power. At times, their influence was untouchable. Olympius might have continued to insult the just resentment of a people who loudly accused him as the author of the public calamities. But his power was undermined by the secret intrigues of the palace. The favorite eunuchs transferred the government to Honorius, and the empire to Jovis, the Praetorian prefect, an unworthy servant, who did not atone by the merit of his personal attachment for the errors and the misfortunes of his administration. Why did the eunuchs have the authority to transfer power? The ability to transfer power means you have the ultimate authority. You are the levers of control. During the same time period, you get this pure chaos unfolding. These couple sentences just have so much happening in them. Instigated by the prefect Jovinus, the guards rose in furious mutiny and demanded the heads of 2 generals and of the 2 principal eunuchs. The generals, under a perfidious promise of safety, were sent on shipboard and privately executed, while the favor of the eunuchs procured them a mild and secure exile at Milan and Constantinople. Eusebius, the eunuch, and the barbarian Alabish succeeded to the command of the bedchamber and of the guards, and the mutual jealousy of these subordinate ministers was the cause of their mutual destruction. By the insolent order of the Count of the Domestics, the great chamberlain was unshamefully beaten to death with sticks before the eyes of the astonished emperor, and the subsequent assassination of Alabish in the midst of a public procession is the only circumstance of his life in which Honorius discovered the faintest symptom of courage or resentment. Yet before they fell, Eusebius and Alabish contributed their part to the ruin of the empire by opposing the conclusion of a treaty which Jovis, from a selfish and perhaps a criminal motive, had negotiated with Alaric in a personal interview under the walls of Rumini. During the absence of Jovis, the emperor was persuaded to assume a lofty tone of inflexible dignity, which, as neither his situation nor his character could enable him to support. And a letter, signed with the name of Honorius, was immediately dispatched to the Praetorian prefect, granting him a free permission to dispose of the public money, but sternly refusing to prostitute the military honors of Rome to the proud demands of a barbarian. The first events of the reign of Arcadius and Honorius were so intimately connected that the rebellion of the Goths and the fall of Rufinus have already claimed a place in the history of the West. It has already been observed that Eutropius, one of the principal eunuchs of the palace of Constantinople, succeeded the haughty minister whose ruin he had accomplished and whose vices he soon imitated. Every order of the state bowed to the new favorite, and their tame and ubiquitous submission encouraged him to insult the laws and, what is still more difficult and dangerous, the manners of his country. Under the weakest of the predecessors of Arcadius, the reign of the eunuchs had been secret and almost invisible. They insulated themselves into the confidence of the prince, but their ostensible function were confined to the menial services of the wardrobe and the imperial bedchamber. They might direct in a whisper the public councils, and blast, by their malicious suggestions, the fame and fortunes of the most illustrious citizens, but they never presumed to stand forward in front of the empire, or to profane the public honors of the state. The bold and vigorous mind of Rufinus seemed to have been actuated by a more sanguinary and revengeful spirit, but the avarice of the eunuchs was not less insatiated than that of the prefect. As long as he despoiled the oppressors, who had enriched themselves with the plunder of the people, the eunuch Eutropius might gratify his covetous disposition without much envy or injustice. but the progress of his rapine soon invaded the wealth which had been acquired by lawful inheritance or laudable industry. The most usual method of extortion was practiced and improved, and Claudian had stretched a lively and original picture of the public auction of the state. The impotence of the eunuchs, said that agreeable satirist, had served only to stimulate his avarice. The same hand which, in his servile condition, was exercised in petty thefts to unlock the coffers of his masters, now grasped the riches of the world, and his infamous broker of the empire appreciates and divides the Roman provinces from Mount Hemus to the Tigris. One of the traits of the eunuchs and all people of the deep state is you have to destroy competence and to get rid of people who won't play by your supposed rules. We saw this previously with the general Eunuchs from Part 2. We see it here again. The destruction of Tamasus required a more serious and regular mode of attack. That great officer, the master general of the armies of Theodosius, had signalized his valor by a decisive victory which he obtained over the Goths of Thessaly. But he was too prone, after the example of his sovereign, to enjoy the luxury of peace, and to abandon his confidence to the wicked and designing flatterers. Tamasus had despised the public clamor by promoting an infamous dependence to the command of a cohort, and he deserved to feel the ingratitude of Bargus, who was secretly instigated by the favorite to accuse his patron of a treasonable conspiracy. The general was arraigned before the tribunal of Arcadius himself, and the principal eunuch stood by his side of the throne to suggest the questions and answers of his sovereign. As we have come to an end in Part 3, we have seen so many examples of the eunuch's power. There really wasn't a part of the Roman leadership that they didn't decide, or at least had a say. And this is an important part of the deep state, meaning the emperor has a choice of, say, for example, 5 people for a role. But if all 5 people were picked by the eunuchs, do you really have a choice? If the president can nominate who they want as the head of the Federal Reserve, but of all the choices the president has, all of the people have the same ideology or approach, does he really have a choice?